Awesome.
All right. Welcome, everybody, officially again. So exciting to see you in the virtual ether. Welcome to the Laurie Okuma Memorial Reading. I am Megan Marshall. I'm the director of the Hussey Hyde Living Writers Series. And, it's great to all be here from all different places, united under the celebration of story and literature. We're very excited to welcome our dynamic authors joining us, as mentioned, all the way from Seattle. And even though we are coming to you via Zoom tonight, I do want to acknowledge the Kumeyaay land that we are privileged to inhabit here in San Diego. As members of the SDSU community, we respect and celebrate this legacy. I also want to take a moment to thank those who have helped to make this event and this series possible, including my fabulous co-host, Markle Tumlin, in addition to our other friends from Love Library, Rebecca Williamson, and Laurel Bliss. I also want to thank the Department of English and Comparative Literature for their continued support of the series. And tonight, I'd also like to issue a very, very special thanks to the Okuma family for the endowment that allows us to honor the memory of beloved SDSU MFA alumna Laurie Matsueda Okuma by featuring the work of a woman poet or prose writer. In addition to earning her MFA, Laurie also taught at SDSU and was committed to bringing attention to writers whose voices are often silenced. So we are always happy to celebrate her legacy along with her family's continued support. Just a couple of reminders. If of course, please keep your mic muted during the presentation and know that it is being recorded. If you'd like to view the recording after the event, please find it on the Hussey Hyde Living Writers Series YouTube channel. We've got other videos from past events, in addition to lots of really great content created by students enrolled in the class. So a little bit of something for everyone. And then there will be time for Q&A after the presentation, so feel free to share any questions that you might have at that point. All right, well, I am honored to introduce our featured author. Molly Olguín is a queer writer and educator based in Seattle. She holds a BA in English from Williams College and an MFA in fiction from The Ohio State University. Her collection, The Sea Gives Up the Dead, from which she'll share tonight, was the winner of the 2023 Grace Paley Prize in short fiction. Her short stories have appeared in Orange and Bee, Paranoid Tree, Redivider, The Normal School, River Styx, Quarterly West, and others. She is a 2025 Jack Hazard Fellow and was the recipient of the Loft Mentor Series Fellowship in 2019. She was awarded the 2015 AWP Intro Awards Prize in Fiction for her short story, Seven Deaths. With Jackie Hedeman, she is the creator of the queer sci-fi audio drama, The Pasithea Powder. She loves cats, same, crows, and monsters of all kinds, and teaches English and creative writing to some very lucky high school students. I was first introduced to The Sea Gives Up the Dead at this year's AWP conference when it was highly recommended to me by the friendly folks at Red Hen Press. And I read the first story, for which she won the AWP Intro Award, Seven Deaths, in my hotel room that night. And the story begins like this. Here is the truth. Everyone has but a single death to give to God, even his holy son, whose second life stretches on without end. This is also the truth. Roque Contreras and his family died 7 times in 3 years with only one grave to show for it. I was struck instantly by the unique style and voice, and like a truly impactful work of art, I couldn't stop thinking about it. As I dove deeper into the collection, I remained in awe of Olguín's ability to craft dynamic characters, render powerful prose, queer traditional tales, and further interrogate the conceit that obsesses all writers, death. Of her work, author Andrea Barrett raves, witty, witchy, darkly brilliant, Molly Olguín's metaphoric tales radiate insight and intelligence, exploding into visions fresh and surprising. So please join me in giving a warm Zoom welcome to Molly Olguín.
Oh my God. Thank you so much. That is such a beautiful introduction. I am so excited to be here. I'm so excited to read a story to you and to get to talk to you about it. Um, I actually want to ask all of you if there's a story you would like to hear. With like 20, 30 minutes, I could probably read a whole story, which I rarely get to do. So if you guys have read it and there's a story where you're like, ooh, I really want to hear this one, do you want to put that in the chat? If there's not one, if you're not sure, I can also pick one. That's okay. Ooh, Princess Wants for Company, The Undertaker's Dogs. Two Princess Wants for Companies. Okay, the current winner. Devils Also Believe. Sea Gives Up the Dead. I like that you guys like different ones. Two Devils Also Believe. Ooh, Three Devils Also Believe. It's in the lead. Let's go Devils Also Believe. That's kind of fun. I've actually never read from Devils Also Believe because there's stories that I think have like good like 5 to 7 minute excerpts, and that one is a little hard for me to pull things out of. Um, oh, two votes for Film on the Waves, but let's do Devils Also Believe. That's a good one. Okay. Um, Devils Also Believe. The devil's battle with Santa Lucia was matched when her mother began coughing in the night. It was a bad cough, deep and rattling, waking the devil from uneasy dreams. Go back to sleep, her mother rasped, wiping her mouth against her sleeve. The devil lay down, but did not fall asleep. There were signs up in the parks banning public spitting. The druggist on her block had sold out of aspirin and balm weeks ago. Lucia told her the hospital was choked with flu victims, and now her mother was coughing. The bed they shared shook a little as her mother strove to breathe evenly, and the devil stayed awake for hours. You have the flu, the devil said in the morning, and even saying it to be contradicted made her shiver a little. You're probably going to die. I have a cold, her mother said sternly, scraping the devil back into twin braids. Colds, the world ending. But the devil was not convinced. Death was no stranger to her house. Her grandmother had succumbed to a fistula when the devil was 4 years old, her grandfather to heartbreak shortly after. Mrs. Riley, who used to board with them, had been struck dead by a trolley 1 year ago. Her father was away fighting the Germans, and she knew he could be killed at any time. Most grievous of all, or so she told herself, 3 months ago the devil's tabby cat had choked on a chicken bone that Lucia had dropped on the kitchen floor and expired. Her 12 years had hardened her. If you die, she said to her mother, trying to make a joke out of it, will I have to stay with the Amadores, do you think? Because then maybe I'd like to die too. If I die, her mother replied as she dug the comb into the devil's scalp, it will be because Mrs. Amadori murders us in our sleep, and not a court in the land would convict her. If you care about my health, you leave those poor people alone. But this, the devil knew well, was easier said than done. Lucia Amadori had come into the devil's life the year before, the worst year of the devil's life to date. First, her father's conscription papers had come, and then he'd been shipped far away, and then the Amadoris descended on her home. Her own small and white-daubed house, well situated on Sorrento Street, only 7 miles from Ole Bay. Once upon a time it had supported her mother and father in one upstairs bedroom, herself in the other, and Mrs. Riley in the lodger's room that was once the parlor. Mrs. Riley had been kind and quiet and used to admire the devil's pale hair, and never once said it was suspicious, given that her father's hair was brown. Only then she collided with that trolley, and the Amadori family swarmed into every empty space the house had left, filling it with strange sounds and stranger smells. There was Mrs. Amadori, fat and frog-faced, Mrs. Amadori's mother, who even the devil was directed to address as Nona, a baby who screamed the whole night long, and Lucia. They were all of them terrible, but Lucia was the worst. She was 12, same as the devil, which meant they had to share a teacher at school. She had awful, greasy hair that stained the shoulders of her dresses yellow, and she wanted to be a nun when she grew up, which made her insufferable as well as ugly. She liked to carry around her family's worn Italian Bible and read aloud in pitying tones while giving the devil significant looks. It was Lucia who had bestowed upon her the devil's fatal nickname. It began simply. The devil, then called Anne Marie, did her best to convince the Amadoris that they should find a home somewhere else. She unclipped their laundry from the line and blamed it on the wind. She hid the old woman's shoes. She crept into her former bedroom she had been forced to share with her mother so Lucia and the baby could have a room of their own and shoved a rotten herring under each flat pillow. She emptied fistfuls of sand from her pockets into the soup left simmering on the stove until Lucia, nose in her Bible, caught her. Lucia tried to hit her with the book, and so Anne Marie tossed the remaining sand into Lucia's fat, sallow face. When Mrs. Amadori came down from the bathroom, Anne-Marie's eye had been blacked, Lucia's right hand was bleeding from where she'd bitten down hard, half the soup was spilled down Anne-Marie's dress, the Bible was stewing in the bottom of the pot, and Lucia was screeching that she was a devil, the very devil herself in human form. After this, the Amadoris were on to her. The devil did the washing up, one might say, so check for soap. Or, watch out, the devil has a butter knife. Or, lock up your soggy book, Lucia, the devil has a look in her eye. Mrs. Amadori told her mother flat out that she better keep the devil girl away from her baby, or she wouldn't be responsible for what happened. Anne-Marie's ears rang from being boxed, but eventually she determined to embrace the name, and not just because of what her mother termed her contrary nature. She had already resolved to make Lucia's life as hellish as she could get it. If she was going to be awful, she decided, she wouldn't just be very awful. She would be terrible. Much worse than Lucia could have imagined when she'd called her the devil herself. She took to hissing at Lucia when she got too close, and turned the cross Nona hung on her bedroom door upside down on a daily basis, knowing the old woman would curse in Italian and drop the cross at least once while trying to set it right with arthritic hands. At school, she made a point of kicking the back of Lucia's chair and glaring significantly at her and her friends when they complained that she was giving them the evil eye. After a while, nobody called her Anne Marie, not even the girls at school. Nobody except her mother, and of course her father, in his letters. The devil's father was the best man in the whole world, even if he was a German like the enemy. He spoke with an accent, but a comfortable, rounded accent, not fast and sharp as the Italians talked. Sometimes she thought about how the Germans in Europe must all sound like him. A whole nation of father-voiced men, all awful enough that the army needed her pa to go and fight them. His letters came in a special thin paper with their special strange stamps and black censored lines, deeply thrilling and always frightening. Her mother read them out loud when they came, and then she folded them away into the bedside drawer, in a neat pile tied with brown string. Sometimes she saw her mother read them again to herself, but she never wanted to read them out loud more than once. Also in the drawer rested her mother's wedding ring, thin but made of real silver, shut up with all her father's treasures, because the soap at the laundry would tarnish it. The devil hoarded details about her father, reciting them to herself whenever she thought she might be forgetting, all the better to keep him real and living in her imagination. Her father was tall, with brown hair and blue eyes. He had huge hands, the lines on his palms stained black with ingrained dirt. He called her Bunny and her mother Edith. He had built the bed in Mrs. Amadori's room. He had laid the brick steps outside the house. He had carved a little heart into one of the kitchen table legs where only Anne Marie would see it, back when she was small. The treasure drawer also would have held the little heart necklace her father had given her mother, the one her mother never wore because she feared it would rust or be lost, but the devil had stolen it for herself. She wore it under her collars at home, drawing it out to catch the light when she went to school. It made a tiny lump just below the dip of her collarbone, and she often pressed a hand against it, the metal warm against her skin. The devil worried about her mother's cough all day. More than ever, the city seemed to be bracing itself, the parks emptying and more druggists selling out of medicine. The flu had left its mark on San Francisco, on Los Angeles, on San Bernardino and Baderville, but it had only brushed San Diego. Mrs. Amadori had left an Italian newspaper on the table that morning, and although the devil couldn't read it, she could tell what the photograph of a grim man with a doctor's white coat and metal contraptions signified. Her teacher interrupted their arithmetic lesson to remind them that wearing a neckerchief could save their lives, because it could be wrapped around the face and defend against the deadly germ. I think they should burn the bodies, Lucia suggested during lunch, and all the girls, including the devil, turned. Mr. Amadori was an army medic, so Lucia was understood to have authority on the subject. That way they can't spread the infection anymore. The germs will turn to ash, is what my father says. That's stupid, the devil said. What about the sick people? You can't burn them up. Stop saying foolish things that won't even help, she wanted to add, feeling even angrier than usual, but Lucia was already drawing herself up. Sure you could, Lucia said. It's not like they'll live much longer anyway. The hospitals are beds of infection, my father says. They'll all just kill each other quicker. The devil thought about yanking one of her greasy braids, just to let her know how much of an idiot she was being. But the other girls were laughing, so she didn't. Bet you won't think so when your pa comes home infected, the devil told her, although she knew it wasn't right to say. There was a strained silence, and then Lucia told the devil that she wouldn't be surprised if the devil was already sick. I heard you coughing last night, she said with a cloying sympathy, and suddenly everyone was looking at the devil. The flu only affects adults, the devil argued, because it was true. That was why the doctors were so worried, seeing it didn't spread as most sicknesses did. Children and the old were spared. It was healthy adults who tended to succumb. Your eyes do look pink. The cheeks were awfully flushed. You're supposed to stay home if you're sick, another girl said, and everyone was in agreement. You could be infecting us all right now, Lucia suggested, still alight with her pretended charity. We should really check her tongue. You live in my house, the devil pointed out, and then everyone was looking at Lucia, too. The teacher rang the bell, and they all stood, packing up their things. Lucia tried to pry open the devil's jaw anyway, and the devil snapped at her fingers. I'd burn you up in a heartbeat, Lucia murmured as they returned to the schoolroom, and the devil knew she wouldn't be forgiven for the remark about Mr. Amadori. That's what you do with witches, Lucia finished, and shoved past the devil. The devil spit on the back of Lucia's bare neck, just to prove they would all burn together. Later that night, the devil fought with her mother behind the closed door of their bedroom. They argued in whispers so as not to alert the Amadoris, although the devil's whispers shook and sometimes flared into half-voiced whines. She was of the opinion that her mother should stay home from work until the cold went away. Didn't the devil stay home when she got sick? Why should her mother do anything less? Because I've got a job, her mother said, and the whites of her eyes were pink and her cheeks were very flushed, and we can't afford for me to lose it. The devil felt that this was stupid because they also couldn't afford a doctor, which was what her mother would need if her cold got any worse. And if they needed money, maybe she should stop going to work and just work at the going to school and just work at the laundry. Don't you talk about that, her mother snapped, looking truly angry for the first time since the devil had started nagging her. What would your pa say if I had you working up to your elbows in lie every day? He'd die of shame if he knew, so don't you even think it. The devil flinched. Her mother had a strict rule about how they spoke about her father. They never, ever spoke his name in the same sentence as death. It didn't do to tempt fate, not when he was sheltering in some faraway trench with only God to look after him. I'm sorry, she muttered, and when she dared to look up, her mother had put a hand on the bedside table where her wedding ring rested. She was still coughing. I'll bring you some supper, the devil offered, and went quietly out of the room. The devil made dinner in an occupied kitchen, Nona guarding a boiling pot on the stove, and Lucia sitting at the kitchen table with her Bible, the pages wrinkled and dried into odd shapes. Nona said something fast in Italian. She says no funny business today, Lucia translated coldly, without looking up. She did this sometimes, when she remembered that she wanted to be a nun, and pretended to bear the devil's hatred with holy equanimity. Your face is funny business, the devil said, and went to look through the cupboard. It was full of Amadori bread, Amadori onions, and tomatoes, but nearly bare of food for her. She would have to remind her mother to do the shopping tomorrow. She picked up a tomato to look behind it, and then the old woman was at her side, saying something else in her gibberish tongue. Don't steal our tomatoes, Lucia said, and the devil glared at both of them and made a show of dropping the tomato on the counter. Eventually, she found 2 eggs that she knew belonged to her and mixed them up with a little milk to make them stretch further. Nona continued to talk, and the devil did her best to ignore her until she caught the word madre and the word demone, uttered several times with feeling. What's she saying about my mother? The devil demanded, dropping her wooden spoon into the skillet. She's not saying anything about your mother, Lucia said evenly, although her cheeks were red because she was striving as hard as she could for the patience of a saint. Well, you make sure she doesn't, the devil said, and slammed a cupboard door shut. You really are full of spirit today, Lucia said with practiced condescension. And making supper for your mother, too. I wonder if it was your coughing I heard last night? The devil's chest went hot and tight with terror. Don't you say a word, she hissed, you filthy liar. I'll kill you if you say a word to anyone. Nona said something sharply in Italian, and Lucia shook her head. Her smile was small but nasty. I could tell her your ma is sick right now, she said to the devil. Why shouldn't I? Because you can't, the devil said, her breath coming too fast and her heart drumming just as quick. She knew the sick had been forced out of homes before. Who would shelter a plague victim? Not even the hospitals wanted them. Her hands balled into fists, and she took one dangerous step forward, unsure of what she might do. But Lucia gave her a cool look. Nona, she began. Penso che. No, the devil insisted, uneasily aware of Nona's black gaze darting between them like a carrion crow's. Don't. What do you want? Lucia took a minute to think. Give me your heart necklace, and I never heard a thing, she decided. What could the devil do? She loved her father, but he was an ocean away, and her mother was feverish and coughing in the next room. And hadn't her mother betrayed him only half an hour ago? She could always steal it back, she promised herself. With slow, hateful movements, she went to undo the clasp. Not now, Lucia said, smiling at her. Give it to me later, where nobody can see. That night, the devil's mother tossed and turned in bed, and the devil took a blanket and slept on the floor, one hand pressed to her own naked throat. Lucia wore the devil's necklace under her collars at home, but the devil could see the little silver line at the base of her neck and loathed her even more than she had before. In the devil's nightly prayers, Lucia suffered 100 terrible fates, struck by trolleys and trampled by donkeys and tossed off cliffs. When Lucia and the devil went to school, Lucia drew the little heart out from under her collar, letting it rest against the third round button on her dress. The sight started up an awful ache in the devil's chest, bad enough that she wondered if she wasn't infected after all. Her mother's cold got worse. The cough developed a warning little rattle at the end. Her eyes were black and unfocused, and she sweated through her shift every night. She conceded that this was a worse cold than usual, but still refused to stay home from the laundry. The devil started crushing up aspirin pills and dropping them into her mother's water and did not mention that the shopping had been left undone for a whole week. She didn't think her mother even noticed, she was that exhausted from work. When the cupboard was bare of all but Amadori vegetables, the devil went to Ole Beach instead of school. She had never done it before, but she knew there were abalone to be found off the pier. She dimly remembered her father dive for them, watching her father dive for them, a long metal rasp in one hand, emerging with a net full of fat shells the size of his fists. She couldn't find the rasp, but she had found a butter knife as well as her suit and bathing stockings. She went down to the end of the pier, where the big rocks went down deep. It was more difficult than it seemed. For one thing, the abalone clung to the rock like they had been welded there, and for another, the salt water stung her eyes, so she had to work by feel alone. She held on to the rock with one hand so she wouldn't bob back up to the surface, forced her eyes open, and hacked madly at the abalone's tough shells for as long as she could bear before she needed to breathe again. In this way, she managed to gather two medium-sized specimens and one rather small one. She didn't want to leave them on the beach or the breakwater for anyone to steal, but nor could she carry them while she foraged for more. She resorted to stuffing them as far down her stockings as she could and using her hair ribbons to seal off the top of her stockings. The ribbons dug into her legs unpleasantly, but she ignored it and sucked in another huge breath of air before diving back down. She latched onto the rock, the water naturally pushing her legs up over her head. She felt around for a big shell this time, one nearly as big as both her hands put together, and pushed the knife in as far as she could, working it back and forth. As she worked, her legs were battered against the rocks harder than before, as she was obliged to flex her feet awkwardly in an attempt to keep the shells in her socks from getting loose. She didn't have the shell even halfway detached from the rock wall before she ran out of breath and had to return to the surface. When she did, she found Lucia sitting on her rock, looking down at her. Defensively, she pushed herself away from the rock, treading water a few feet away. I'd get out of the water if I were you, Lucia said, elbows on her knees. She was fully clothed and her face was shiny with sweat, so she must have run all the way down the pier from the beach expressly to torment the devil. The little heart gleamed at her breast. Are you in the Navy now? The devil asked, as in as scathing a tone as she could manage, while bobbing up and down in the water, the heavy shells in her stockings hampering her kicking feet. No? Then go away. It's for your own good, Lucia said, and pointed at the devil's arms, where she had scraped herself against the rock. You're bleeding, she said, and there was a strange tone to her voice that the devil couldn't interpret. Every shark in the bay is probably headed straight for you. That's not true, the devil said, but now she was uncomfortably aware of the scratches on her arms and shins, the blood drifting slowly away into the water. She was too proud to climb up onto the rock, though the thought of something swimming up from beneath made her breath quicken. Anyway, I'm not done yet, she said to Lucia. I've got one more shell to pry off. Lucia narrowed her eyes. Well, I'm not going to leave, she said. I'll splash if I see a fin. Don't bother, the devil said, and Lucia rolled her eyes. There was nothing left for the devil at this point but to suck in a breath and dive back down. She could barely find the shell she was working on. She was so busy checking to make sure there weren't any dark shapes charging at her from below. She gave the shell one half-hearted bash with her butter knife when the water around her went white and frothy, like something enormous had come crashing through it. She lost all her breath and kicked for the surface, dropping the knife and not caring enough to go back for it. Her empty lungs strained and the water crushed at her limbs, but she made it. She sobbed in air and clawed at the rock, pulling herself out of the water as quickly as she could. Lucia's shoes were sitting beside her, her skirt pulled up, bare legs still idly beating at the surface. There was no shark. The devil had lost the butter knife for nothing. Oh, sorry, did I bother you? Lucia asked. I just felt like getting my feet wet. The devil wanted to push her in, only she remembered the heart necklace and the care she had taken to keep it from rust or tarnish. What do you want? She asked instead, shivering in the slight breeze. Don't you have enough? I want to talk, Lucia said. Your ma, she's not getting better. She is, the devil insisted, uneasy. I've heard coughing the last 2 nights, Lucia said, and that unfamiliar edge was back in her voice. It could almost be concern if she wasn't lying. The devil had watched her mother muffle her sounds into a pillow for hours the night before. I only thought she had a cold, Lucia said, twisting the necklace chain around one finger. Now she might really be sick. What else do you want? The devil asked, too exhausted to keep arguing. The heart disappeared and reappeared in Lucia's yellow fingers. I want you to be my friend, Lucia said. They went home together, and Lucia did not immediately inform the household that the devil had missed school. She followed the devil into the kitchen, chattering about nothing, and the devil nodded stiffly every now and then. She tried to busy herself by spreading her abalone shells out on the kitchen table. Lucia came and helped her split open the shells. I think you should smile at me, she said, and the devil bared her teeth. You're such a dear child, Lucia said with a sigh. We'll have to teach you better ways, of course. Give me that, she said, pointing to the white slug of the first abalone that the devil was trying to extract with a fork. You're doing it wrong. She used a spoon to work them cleanly out and instructed the devil to hammer the naked slugs with a rolling pin. Don't boss me, the devil snapped, and Lucia gave her a sweet smile. I'm helping you, she said, with a deliberate glance at the door where the devil's mother would return soon from the laundry. Isn't that what friends do? The devil swallowed her reply. Hit it hard, Lucia said, pointing to the abalone. It's a muscle. It needs to be relaxed. The devil hit the abalone hard and wondered if it was dead yet, or if it had died as soon as it left the water. Lucia washed out the shells and ordered the devil to admire the slick rainbows coating their insides. Beautiful, the devil said. Lucia told her to cut the meat, and the devil cut the meat. Put it in a pot with fat, Lucia said. We're going to make a soup. I don't have enough for a soup, the devil said, her hand tightening on the knife. We're going to share, Lucia told her, dark eyes on hers, even though they both knew the devil had done the work, that she had no other food. The devil thought about her mother clutching a pillow to her face in the night, desperate to remain unheard, and went to get a pot. Lucia added a handful of gifts the devil couldn't pay back. Chopped onions, some precious cream, more fat, some starch, a handful of peas, a careful pinch of foreign spices. Stir it, Lucia ordered, and the devil stirred. Doesn't it smell wonderful? Lucia asked, and the devil duly agreed. At this point the front door opened, but there was no sound of someone coming in. The devil left the spoon in the pot and ran to the door. Her mother was leaning against the frame, one hand still on the brass knob, and her eyes were closed. Are you all right? The devil asked, ashamed that her voice came out so high and small, especially where Lucia could hear. I'm just catching my breath, her mother said, but she had to be helped inside. Lucia appeared and watched them, her stupid eyes enormous in her head, and the devil finally said, Are you going to help us or not? Slowly, as if she was being physically compelled, Lucia came and offered the devil's mother her other arm. They got her up the stairs together, the devil panting with shame, her mother breathing hard with effort, Lucia for once in her life silent. I think I will rest a while, her mother said vaguely, and lay down on the bed slowly, as if each motion pained her. The devil stood there for a terrible minute, just looking at her mother's chest rising up and down, until she remembered Lucia was watching too. She grabbed the other girl's arm and dragged her out, shutting the door gently behind them. She's sick, Lucia said in a horrified whisper. She's really sick. Oh, Lord, are you crazy? You need to take her to the hospital. Your own father said the hospitals make it worse with everybody infecting everybody else, the devil accused, and saw the truth of it in Lucia's face. She just needs to rest. I'm going to get her some more aspirin, and then she'll sleep and she'll be fine in the morning. But Lucia was shaking her head, eyes still huge. No, no, you're crazy. I'm going to tell. You can't, the devil said, and her grip tightened on Lucia's arm, fingernails digging in. You can't or she won't get better. What do you want? I can get you anything. Lucia tried to pull away, but the devil didn't let go. You want a ring? She offered in desperation, the last thing she had of any value, made of real silver. Lucia only looked at her helplessly, and the devil shoved her back into the wall. Wait, she said, and went back into the room where her mother slept. She retrieved the wedding ring from the drawer before she could argue herself out of it, and then she was pressing it into Lucia's hands. Keep it, she said, her throat aching with the hurt of her own betrayal. But leave her alone. Lucia made no promises, but she kept the ring. None of the Amadoris went into her mother's room that night. Just the devil, eyes burning and stomach tight, a bowl of fragrant white soup in her hands. I think I will stay home tomorrow, her mother said after accepting the bowl of soup. Rest a while. She put a spoonful of broth to her mouth. It was worth the ring, the devil told herself, breathing through her mouth so she didn't have to inhale the mingled odors of her mother's sweat and the salty soup. Worth 100 rings. Her mother only ate the one spoonful. Later, the devil coaxed her into swallowing 3 more aspirin pills, although it brought on a coughing fit that must have hurt her throat badly, for it turned into a halfway sob near the end. Mrs. Amadori left the bathroom when the devil finally left the bedroom. There was a frown on her wide face, deep lines creasing around her mouth. Your mother, she said in her thick accented voice. She is well? A thin, cracked sound came through the devil's bedroom door. She's sad, the devil lied, and bit the inside of her own cheek, hard enough to draw blood. It's my father. Mrs. Amadori's face changed, and the devil fled. The devil's mother stayed home from the laundry. She did not look in the bedside drawer. The single bowl of soup was barely touched. She complained of a headache, but tossed away the cool cloths the devil tried to bring her. The devil was so exhausted that she found tears springing to her eyes, which Mrs. Amadori took for a sign of grief. Is he wounded? She asked with real sympathy, even as the baby cried in her arms and Lucia almost cut herself where she stood slicing cold water bread. Or, we got the letter yesterday, the devil mumbled, squeezing her eyes shut. I can't. My mother wants to be alone. Of course, Mrs. Amadori said with understanding, and Lucia abruptly left the room. Don't go far, Mrs. Amadori called after her daughter. Still school today. Lucia and the devil left for school together, but by silent agreement they turned around the corner and walked to the beach instead. Lucia had threaded the wedding ring onto her necklace chain, and it shone silver in the sun, brighter even than the heart. They sat on the breakwater, watching the waves crash in and roll out. It occurred to the devil that Lucia looked terrible, waxy skinned with deep hollows under her eyes. But she couldn't be sick. The flu affected adults, everyone said. It's a lie about your father, Lucia said after a while, and the devil nodded. I think that's a rotten thing to do, lying about him. You're one to talk about rotten, the devil said, and hurled a rock the size of her fist at an incoming wave, where it settled with hardly a splash. My father is tall, she told herself. He has brown hair and blue eyes. He made the brick stairs, the driftwood bed, the little carved heart on the kitchen table. He called me Bunny and my mother Edith, and he's alive, just there over the water. What if she dies? Lucia asked, which was, of course, the question the devil had been refusing to consider for days, ever since that first frightened joke. She's not going to die, the devil said fiercely. She hasn't vomited, not at all. What if she died? What would become of the devil then, motherless and fatherless, everything she had in the world hanging around Lucia's neck? She's not that sick, the devil added, the lie bitter and uncertain on her tongue, and for a miserable moment she was glad she had lost her treasures. She felt too worn, too fragile and afraid to keep them safe. Lucia sighed, the heavy sound mingling with the surf, and they stayed there all morning, caught by the wind and spray. That night Lucia betrayed her, as the devil must have known she would. But after all, what more could she do? What was left for the devil to give up? Mrs. Amadori flung the door wide open around 11 o'clock at night, Nona at her side, Lucia a pale shadow behind them. The devil was sitting by the window with a candle on her slate, which fell from her fingers at the sight of Mrs. Amadori's face. It was not angry, as she had thought it might be. Mrs. Amadori looked devastated, as though the war were almost lost instead of almost won, as though her sister and not a stranger lay upon the bed. The devil swallowed down the sob that wanted to come up. It hurt like swallowing a rock, like finding yourself airless and underwater. The devil's mother slowly sat up. Her dress, the devil saw, as the Amadoris must be seeing it, was stained in yellow, the shadows under her eyes black as night, a horrible crust of something at the corner of her mouth. She looked like a spectre, thin and wasted. Nona let forth a fluid stream of Italian, and Lucia gasped. The gasp was too much. How could Lucia breathe when the devil could not? How dare Lucia feel horror or shock or fear or whatever it was she felt when the devil was swallowing stones, was crushed under the weight of water? Edith, Mrs. Amadori murmured, and the devil picked up her slate and threw it as hard as she could at Lucia's head. She missed, and it hit the door inches away from Lucia's eyes. I'll kill you, the devil screamed. Only then Mrs. Amadori turned that terrible look on her, and she couldn't bear to be in the room any longer. She ran out the door, pushing past Mrs. Amadori and the old woman and Lucia. She left her mother there and could not pretend the wind in her lungs felt anything relief. She flew down the stairs and out the front door, and she was halfway down the street when she realized she was barefoot and she was not alone. Lucia had followed her, also in her nightgown. They must look ridiculous, she thought, two barefoot girls panting at each other under a street lamp, rows of dark houses there to witness. I'm sorry, Lucia said, and was trying to work the clasp of the heart necklace off, but her fingers couldn't quite do it in the dark. She was crying, and the devil thought maybe she really would kill her. I'm sorry, but I also have a mother. I don't care, the devil said, and she went to give her a shove, but Lucia took a step in, and somehow it wasn't a push, just her hands on Lucia's shoulders. Maybe she'll get better, Lucia whispered, gripping the devil by her forearms. People do get better sometimes. Maybe she will. And the devil pressed her hands against Lucia's chest, felt all the silver tangled there, and beneath that the frightened beating of Lucia's heart. You can take it back, Lucia said, but the devil didn't take it back. Everything she had, almost everything she loved, was right there around Lucia's neck. When she lost her mother and when she lost her father and her white house and her name, Lucia would possess them all. Lucia, jealous and greasy haired, who no one could move, who no one could make vanish. The devil would know. How could she lose anything if Lucia had it all? The thought made her wretchedly, shamefully grateful. I want you to keep it, the devil said, and Lucia's heart beat faster under her palm. Keep everything. I will, Lucia agreed, and she pulled the devil in closer, held her like the devil was a baby, only the ring and the heart and the devil's shaking breath between them. I'll keep it all. And the devil knew she meant, I'll keep you from disappearing. A stupid vow, a child's oath, nothing anyone could keep. I swear, Lucia said, and the devil dug her fingers into Lucia's arms. She could not help believing her. Oh my gosh, we read the whole story in 30 minutes. Thanks, you guys.
That was amazing. If you
You.
want to unmute yourself and actually so that Molly can hear some applause, feel free to do so. She deserves it.
Oh, thanks.
Wow. Yeah. Well, it's wonderful to know that you haven't been able to read that story in, well, I guess you said not even an excerpt, right? Because there wasn't sort of a piece that worked for prior readings.
Yeah, that is the first time I've read that story out loud ever. So that was really fun.
Awesome. Well, one of my favorites as well. I love the dynamic between the characters and the turn at the end, which is really so beautiful.
Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. So now we have some time for Q&A. So if you have a question for Molly, if you either want to put it into the chat or you are welcome to use the little like hand raise function and I can call on you, you can unmute yourself and ask it directly, whatever we're feeling. Chat. Okay. Well, maybe while we're waiting for some questions to come in the chat, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about putting this together. You know, I know that you're sort of writing, you're sending out individual stories, they're getting picked up. Did you always have a sense that you wanted to put things into a collection? Were there themes that you kind of already had in mind? If you could talk a little bit on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I wrote most of these stories when I was in grad school. I was really writing them like not thinking of them as a connected piece. I was thinking of them just as like, oh, these are the stories that I'm interested in. And then I put them together for my MFA thesis and realized like, oh, there's a lot of things that are through lines here because they're it's just what you're interested in at the time when you're writing. You're like, I was really interested in death, clearly. I've got all of these dead girls. I've got all this ocean. I've got like the same place and like the same kind of stories inspired by like my family that kind of like keep coming back up. And so I had it together for my MFA thesis, and then I actually let it sit for quite a long time. And felt actually coming out of my MFA like maybe it wasn't actually that good. Like it needed a lot of work, and I wasn't. I didn't have the time. I was becoming a teacher, and so I came back to it 8 years later, and then 8 years later realized like, hey, I actually don't think it's as bad as I thought it was, and it felt a lot clearer. Like all the things that it had as a through line were much more obvious to me with all of that distance. And then I also was really thinking about it as a collection of weird fairy tales. And so I added a couple more stories. The title story actually didn't get added until that point, just 8 years later. Even though I had the title before, I'm seeing there's a question in here about why did I pick the title? The title came before that story because I found the title was a way to kind of link all of the sort of themes that were coming up, and then realized that the story needed to be in the book as well. I don't know if that answered your question. I went on a ramble there.
No, 100%. And it makes me so happy to hear that, you kind of put it away for a minute, which I think is important. Sometimes you kind of need a bit of that distance, especially after I think sort of the rigor of the MFA. But it's heartening to know that when you did come back to it, it was like, wow, actually, these are really good. And I could, continue writing in this vein.
Yeah, if I have a recommendation, it's take a break, but maybe not for 8 years. Maybe like, put something in your calendar to like come back a couple months later, a year later. Yeah.
Well, since you said you were sort of inspired by fairy tales, there was a question from Candace in the chat that said, which fairy tales inspire you the most?
Ooh, okay. I love fairy tales in general as a genre. Clearly I love The Little Mermaid. I really love retellings and adaptations, and fairy tales are just really ripe for that, right? They're the stories that are meant to be retold. And so there's just a lot of fun things to play with. Um, my actual favorite fairy tale of all time is Beauty and the Beast, because it is a haunted house story and a fall in love with the monster story. And those are two things that I love. And like you put a monster into a haunted house and then you fall in love with the monster in the haunted house. That's fun. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't want the matchup of the monster and the haunted house? It makes perfect sense. Okay, let's see. There was another one. Okay, so Sophia says in the chat, there's a thread throughout the book where horror and faith seem to blur together, almost as if the story is trying to transmute one into the other. How do you think about faith, religious or otherwise, functioning as both a refuge and a site of grief in your work? And do the transformations you write about, whether spiritual or bodily, operate as a form of belief or maybe as a challenge to it?
Ooh, okay, this is a phenomenal question. Um, I feel like okay. So I grew up Catholic, and I don't identify as Catholic anymore. But Catholicism is enough of a bureaucracy that, like, I am officially, like, according to the Catholic Church, still a Catholic. I'm just a really bad Catholic. Because if I wanted to not be a Catholic anymore, I would have to write a letter to a bishop, and the bishop would have to write me a letter back, which I think is very funny. So there's something about like the fact that I grew up with these rituals that are very bureaucratic and to me like very silly, and then of course like there's all the horrors of like the Catholic Church over like time, and then the fact that I still find the rituals comforting, and I find like a lot of reassurance in them whenever something terrible happens. Like whenever I go back to a Catholic church for a funeral, usually I'm like, oh, actually I really appreciate being able to stand and sit and kneel when everyone else is also standing and sitting and kneeling, and like saying the words at the same time as everyone else. Like there's something that I think is uh very reassuring, and like there's like tapping into that like site of like this is I guess like something that is still in me, even though like as a queer person, I really don't like identify with being Catholic at this point. So I think that's kind of what I'm playing with in like the connection you're seeing between like horror, faith, and then like kind of transmutation. Like I think the characters interact with God in these stories very much like they're interacting with a neutral figure. They're interacting with like ritual, they're interacting with like something that doesn't maybe have their best interests at heart, like certainly a very uncaring power until it does suddenly care. Like I think in The Sea Gives Up the Dead, like that ultimately is a story where there's a religious figure who comes in and sort of shakes you until you act better. And like there's that complication and like that perhaps cynicism that like comes back into like this mushy like realm of like, oh, but actually there is some comfort in this still for me, I think is what I'm trying to play with there. I don't know if that answered this question. This is such a multi-layered question.
Yeah, I feel like you definitely hit the layers there and kind of, yes, talking about all these kind of these layers. I love that line. I mean, kind of, thinking in this vein too, from the last story, Foam on the Waves, where the witch looked at him with a smile one could almost call fond. Monsters belong to themselves, she told him, not to God. So this sort of, like you said, it's a presence there, but it's also, we have like a different sense of like ownership of identity and in the, and just bringing back in the monsters and how those all play together.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, yeah, God and a monster. That's a good story for me.
Mhm. Yes. Again, natural matchup, just like Monster Haunted House.
For sure.
Okay, let's see. Let's go into, so there was a couple kind of craft related questions. Jessica says that she's interested in getting better at short stories, fictional stories. So her question is, what makes a strong character in your opinion, and how do you come up with your characters?
Ooh, that's a fun question, Jessica. Okay. I Uh, I think the thing that makes a strong character for me is a strong voice, right? So if I'm like, okay, this is someone who I want to hang out with, like I want to read more of their voice on the page, then I'm like, okay, this is therefore like a character that I'm probably going to enjoy. I think if you write in first person, that's an easy way to sort of immediately feel like what the voice is. If it's a third person story, letting them talk, right? Like in dialogue, like what I really enjoy in the story I just read, like the banter between like these two girls who are both like, I think like basically good kids, but they're really selfish and they're scared, and so they're being like really mean to each other. And like the mean dialogue between the two little girls, I think is really, really fun for me to write. And so the voices of like these mean little kids was really what drew me to that one. I think like there's not that many first person stories in here, but the other little girl story actually, Captain America's Missing Fingers. Like that is like a story where I feel like that voice was something where I had just a lot of fun with really early on. With characters where the story doesn't have as much voice, I think dialogue is a way to get to know them really easily for me. Um, there's I think it's a little more tricky to figure out your character through action, but it can be really fun. Like I think Foam on the Waves is a little less voice driven and a little more action driven because it's leaning into that like a fairy tale retelling, which is the characters are more archetypes that way. Okay, yeah, I character, voice, dialogue, letting them talk. That's my answer.
Well, sound advice. And it was great to hear you read those passages of dialogue in the story. Just kind of, I guess, how you imagine their voices to be and the inflection, just with the sort of banter, right? In those the preteen, angsty, as you said, like they're probably good kids, but they're struggling with all these other things, and that's coming out in these ways. They're projecting in those ways. So it was great to hear you read the dialogue too.
Thanks. I had fun.
So kind of similar. I mean, you had mentioned like first person, third person. Um, Rhiannon. Oh, sorry, I lost it. It was right there. Okay. Rhiannon said some of the stories are written in first person, but many are in third. I was wondering how you determine whether a story needs to be told in first versus third, or is it more of an unconscious choice that occurs as the story unfolds?
Ooh, okay, very fun. I think it's an unconscious choice, but then it's one that I feel like I get to lean into once I've made it, right? So this book is very much like playing with fairy tales, and there's like no first person fairy tales, right? Fairy tales are always that third person voice, that like kind of distant, like once upon a time, right? And so that part that you quoted in your wonderful intro, Megan, from the first story of like the here is the truth, like that authoritative fairy tale voice was something I was really interested in, and so I have I think a lot more third person voices in this book because they all I think to me are still fairy tales, and so they have like that fairy tale distance to them, even the ones that are not supernatural or set in modern times. Captain America's Missing Fingers and I think My Husband and Me are the only two exceptions. And I think Captain America's Missing Fingers that just came out in her voice, and I was like, oh no, I wanna hear what this person has to say. And then the other one's a letter, so maybe it's still third person. You don't get to know.
Yeah, well, that really clicks, when you said about taking this inspiration from fairy tales, right, and kind of having that third person. And I mean, well, in my intro, I was going to say something about like fantastic first sentences, because there's a lot to be said in, writing a fiction, particularly that sort of like you need a dynamite first sentence, right? And so I feel like all of your first sentences were so compelling and strong, and they just make you want to propel into the story. But the one that I had noted from Seven Deaths, I feel like it really just sets up the conceit so well of like, okay, these are sort of retellings of fairy tales or subversions. We have that kind of that third person, like these truths, right? And also just dealing with the literal deaths or metaphorical deaths or near deaths in each of the story. So I loved, in terms of sequencing, I think that it worked really well.
Oh, thank you so much. I definitely on purpose put Seven Deaths first because I do think like in a book about the various kinds of like deaths and like weird deaths, like some of the stories people don't literally die, but it's like a metaphorical death. I was like, this is the story that kind of is the blueprint for everything else that's going to come afterward. So that was uh intentional. I'm glad you picked up on it.
Well, since we're on that subject, how did you decide on the sequencing? I mean, certainly, you spoke to using Seven Deaths as the first story, because I think that they speak, really sort of fluidly to each other. So what was that thought process?
Sure. I think like Seven Deaths, I always knew that had to be the first story because I was like, okay, if you don't like Seven Deaths, I don't think you'll like anything. So like that was a little bit of just like this feels like the story in that way. And then I have loosely like a movement from like less fairy tale towards more fairy tale. I a little bit was thinking about like writing most of this in the MFA program. I'm expecting to have more literary readers, and so I was like, okay, I'm gonna take my literary reader gently by the hand until they're gonna trust me enough for the mermaid, right? Like the mermaids were probably gonna have to come at the end because I was like, oh, if I just start with like my retelling of the Little Mermaid, that's gonna like make people think I'm in a totally different realm than the realm I think I actually am operating in. So it was a Trojan horse. Oh, you're muted, I think.
Oh, yes, sorry. I said I love that. The Trojan horse, right? Yes. And then, like you said, kindly leading readers along, I think is also a wonderful approach. Well, since we're talking about fairy tales, Alex had a question. What is it about fairy tales that you think makes them so timeless? Why do you think we gravitate to this way of storytelling?
Mm. I think there's a lot of ways we could answer that question. I think they're timeless because they're meant to be retold because they're very flexible. I mean, it's also like I've thought a lot about this in talking about the book. Like the difference between like a fairy tale and a myth and a legend, right? Like they're all kind of similar in that like people like to retell them and adapt them and like they last for a really long time. But like a myth is like how does the world work? Let me explain the world, right? And then like a legend is like here's like a great person who did like great deeds and let's hear about this great person. And a fairy tale doesn't need to do either of those things. A fairy tale is just kind of like, okay, some fucked up shit happened, and like we're gonna deal with that, right? Some a weird thing. Oh my gosh, there's so many like weird fairy tales where it really is just like, oh my God, this little boy was murdered and now like the crow speaks with the voice of the little murdered boy and there's not a moral. There's not like something you're gonna understand better about the world after reading the Juniper Tree unless it's like don't kill your stepsons. But like mostly it's just like some fucked up shit happened and like now we have to deal with it. And like I think that is fairly timeless and it's sort of timelessly appealing and uh the lack of like think having a moral or having a lesson I think like makes it stick in your mind as well.
Yeah, I love how you talked about the difference between, sort of like the myth and the legend and the fairy tale. Because I think, of course, we started out telling these stories, trying to make sense of ourselves, trying to make sense of the world. And then I think, as you said, fairy tales kind of build on that, but they don't have to have some sort of moral or didactic approach. They're more so, I mean, what is it like? Chekhov, who said that all of like the worst things that you would never want to happen to like your family or friends should happen to your characters. And I feel like a lot of fairy tales sort of follow that. Like, yeah, a lot of fucked up shit just happens, and like, what are you gonna do?
Yes, yeah, completely.
Okay. Got time for a few more. Where is there something, a particular one in the chat that you saw, Molly, that you feel compelled to answer?
Um, oh my gosh, there's so many cool questions here. Um, oh gosh. I'm seeing the one about are the themes of death being more of a transformation inspired by the meaning of the death card of tarot cards. And I just want to say, not really, but I love that connection because I'm not really a tarot person, but a lot of my friends are. And so that idea of like, oh, the death card is about change. It's not like a bad thing to draw the death card. I think is very much like uh, the approach to death in these stories. Like death is scary, death is sad, but like a lot of these deaths are also just change. And like I think that's why I'm really interested in stories about death, as these are stories about change, and change is interesting.
Well, yeah, as I mentioned, I feel like it's all of writers' obsessions is death. And of course, understandably, human condition, we're trying to figure out why are we here? We know we have a limited time. But then yeah, I understand a little of tarot, but mine is the same understanding that yes, it's about that change. And you see that, with sort of like metaphorical deaths, transformation, a lot that happens in the stories overall. All right. Wait, I think there was one more. Where did we go?
Oh, is it the one about Hans Christian Andersen?
Oh, yes, yeah.
I'm just going to read it aloud so I remember the whole question. Uh, in the book's epigraph, there's a quote by Hans Christian Andersen from The Little Mermaid. When writing such fantastical themes and elements, who are your inspirations, literary or not? Do you see Hans Christian Andersen's work as something that authors of fantastical stories come naturally to? Um, okay. I love The Little Mermaid story so, so much. I don't actually know that I'm especially drawn to Hans Christian Andersen as a whole. I really just like specifically love that story. And I had this like really beautiful illustrated edition of the Hans Christian Andersen story as a little kid that I would read over and over again just because I was really haunted by the sad ending of that story. And especially like comparing it to the Disney version where I was like, oh, okay, like I've got this understanding of like this is the shiny, happy 1980s version, and then here's like what felt like the real version, which is the girl dies and like she sacrifices herself for love and she decides to also die for a man rather than go back to the sea to hang out with her cool sisters. And I was always like both compelled by it and really disappointed by the end of that story. And so in wanting to retell it, I was really interested in what happens like if a girl who's offered a really similar choice ends up making a different one and choosing monstrosity as opposed to choosing that kind of selflessness. Um, and I think other inspirations that I have for this book, obviously really inspired by Carmen Maria Machado, very inspired by Karen Russell's work. Definitely a lot of the like people who've done fun things with like weird fairy tales, like Kelly Link, I think definitely an inspiration. There's not, I don't think other authors like Anderson that I'm engaging with directly in reply to here. So yeah, I guess he is kind of special.
Well, he is, as you mentioned, we sort of probably, many of us had an experience like that of growing up with like you have the Disneyfied version and then you have the much darker version. And then yes, that feeling like the truer version. And in your version, I really appreciate the sort of like subversion of the expectations, that she doesn't abandon her heart's desires, but and she sort of uh, doesn't go back. And so I really love the turn at the end there. And I thought, I mean, what a beautiful story to close. the collection as well. The rolling of the sea, the lattice work drifting with the tide, as steady as longing.
Oh, thank you.
Um, all right. Well, maybe if we can conclude our session with a question. And this is something I like to ask most of our authors because it's always interesting to hear this reply. Um, we're coming to the point in the semester, maybe you feel this way as well, of being a teacher and you have your students that, we're kind of tired, we're maybe lacking inspiration. Is there a particular prompt or mantra or thing that you do when you kind of, you need to do something, but you're feeling uninspired? How do you address those kinds of situations? I know it's like a really loaded question too. Like, give us your advice, please, Molly.
Ooh, okay, okay. Oh, I wish I like thought of an actual prompt for you guys. That'd be fun. Okay, but well, okay, my actual answer for you guys. What do you do when you don't know what to write? Um, I think is to just write the thing you're most excited about writing, even if it's the wrong thing, right? So like write the story that you think no one is gonna like. Write the story where you're like, no, 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 no one's gonna like this because it's a romance, or no one's gonna like this because it has a happy ending, or no one's gonna like this because it's got blood, guts, and gore, or like whatever the thing is that makes you feel like happiest to spend your actual time with the process of writing it. Because at the end of the day, like the process is like what it's about. Like the end product is a byproduct of like the time you're spending getting to write. And so whatever that thing is, if it's fan fiction, write fan fiction. Like the thing that like is gonna bring you joy to sit down with and spend time with is the right thing for you to work on. And a more practical tip is find a creepy movie soundtrack and listen to the creepy movie soundtrack. I really like Nosferatu.
Now that is one thing that I have never heard before, and I love that so much. So you said Nosferatu. Is there another one that maybe is like your go-to for writing?
Uh, Nosferatu, definitely my go-to. My a secondary one, I Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake, really really fun. Like class, that's like how they start the Bride of Frankenstein, the original one. Like that's like a good background. I recommend.
Mhm. All
Oh,
right.
Gone Girl, the Gone Girl soundtrack is also great. Sorry.
Ooh, my favorites: Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross, Nine Inch Nails.
There you go.
Well, and I also love your advice. I feel like I hear a lot, like write the thing you're most afraid of. But I love that, like, write the thing you're most excited of. I mean, about. That's what a positive spin on that.
Yeah, don't write about the thing you're afraid of unless you're like afraid of it in a good way, I think.
Yeah, yeah, right. Like, what will people think if I write fan fiction? Okay, yes, I'm just gonna do it.
Hans Christian Andersen fan fiction. Have fun.
Oh, right, yes. All right, well, let's take a minute, if you can, to maybe unmute yourself and give Molly a huge round of applause. Thank you so, so much for everything this evening.
Oh, thank you so much. This is so much fun.
Yeah, we so appreciate you spending time, joining us all the way from Seattle. We hope we'll get you out here eventually
For sure.
in person. And yes, and you can visit all of the fun places that everyone put in the chat.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much.
All right. Yes, thank you all too for being a wonderful audience. Thank you for your great questions. And everybody, I would say get home safely, but hopefully, you're already home. And thank you so much again, Molly. I really, really appreciate you.
This was an absolute delight. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, everybody, thank you. Take care. Good night.